trying to protect you from this. This is illegal because of the Nixon administration.
Totally.
Yeah, that's it. And it didn't make it. And they've probably set our psychological evolution, the evolution of our culture, back hundreds of years.
Potentially cool thing there.
Aha. Possible ancient Chinese reference. A 3rd century CE Taoist text described a flesh spirit mushroom, which when eaten raw, lets one see a little person and attain transcendence. This is intriguing, but it's not confirmed species identification, so it should not be treated as proof that the text refers to L. asiatica. Okay, well, what other mushrooms allow you to see little people?
They call it Lilliputian hallucinations.
Papua New Guinea. Mushroom madness in the Western Highlands beginning in 1934 involving dramatic behavioral changes and reports consistent with little person visions. This exact mushroom involved remains unconfirmed. It may or may not have been L. asiatica. Well, I bet the Papua New Guinea climate is probably at least reasonably similar to the Philippines, right?
Yeah.
Modern documentation. Chinese researchers reported cases of Lilliputian hallucinations after mushroom consumption in Yunnan in 1991. L. asiatica itself was only formally described scientifically in 2015 after market specimens were genetically examined. Wow.
It sounds just like Gulliver's Travels. We have like an explanation of it. So wouldn't it be maybe that's what the author of that book
Right.
probably maybe at least had a story about?
Right. That's probably
personal
exactly what it
explanation.
is. That's probably fucking exactly what it is. This guy went on a journey. He's like, I tell you, little fucking tiny people are fucking with me.
Exactly.
It's like, I wonder, like, what that is and whether or not they're actually here all the time, and that just lets you pop in and check.
Yeah, who knows?
Yeah.
It's hard to say.
Well, we're so limited in our senses. Just think about what we know about. Just think about what we know about the quantum world. What we know about subatomic particles. Like, we can't see those, but yet we know they exist. Well, why can't we see them? Because our senses aren't good enough.
Yeah.
So, like,
And
what
you
else?
can't even measure them. There's like Heisenberg uncertainty principles where you can't measure the position and momentum at the same time of an electron perfectly accurately.
Yeah. And they also can be in two places at one time. Which is what? Okay.
Yeah,
They're
entanglement.
not two different things? No. Okay. They also could be still and moving at the same time. Okay. What the fuck are we even talking about? It sounds like we're talking about bullshit or magic or both.
Yeah.
Right? So our senses are the real culprit here. It's a real problem.
And back then, real scientists, credible scientists, like Einstein was going to debate Niels Bohr. There's a great book called What is Real by a guy named Adam Becker about all of this, where Einstein was saying the quantum stuff is too spooky. They call it spooky action at a distance. It's too weird, and we need to reconcile it with some sort of ontological truth or reality. You can't just say, shut up and calculate. It's not just this like mathematical formalism. And I think now it's turned into just this like heuristic for like doing science. Oh, we built transistors and semiconductors based on quantum mechanics or whatever. But actually, it's like way trippier. If you like look into like what it points to as far as reality itself, it's way weirder.
Yeah. Yeah, McKenna was one of the first people that I ever heard talk about like using psilocybin mushrooms in particular as a method of contacting UFOs. You know, and he was like, you know, people that are looking for UFO, well, they're very available. Like, you know, his weird way of talking.
He was almost like a machine elf himself. The way he spoke, he would like kind of, I don't know, he had this kind of trickstery vibe. There's an amazing clip actually with him and John Mack, where John Mack is actually getting like kind of very ideologically angry, and actually similar to what you just said about Rick Strassman. He had gone through this crazy kind of review of his credentials at Harvard. He was being almost stripped of them, of his position rather, because of looking into, you know, alien abductions as, you know, this lead at Harvard in the psychiatry department. And you just see like McKenna sort of like goading him along and being kind of cheeky. And he was just such a funny, interesting character who was so simultaneously trippy, but also precise in his language, was extremely smart. Too.
Yeah, extremely smart, but also like really wanted to believe. Like he had that weird time wave zero thing that he He thought there was going to be some sort of an event on December 21st, 2012, which is the end of the long count of the Mayan calendar. He was convinced that like there was going to be some sort of an event. Like that time was, and he thought, obviously this is in the 90s when he was talking about this and discussing it. He thought it was going to be the invention of a time machine.
That's so crazy.
Yeah.
He would also trip for weeks on end, as you know, with his brother in the Amazon, and he would download all sorts of stuff. I almost feel like the implicit kind of foundational philosophy that he has is that mushrooms are aliens themselves.
Yeah.
And the reason I think that is because, so in 1973, I believe, Francis Crick, who discovered the double helical structure of DNA, wrote a paper, and then he followed it up with a book in 1981 called Life Itself. And it's all about how DNA, in 100 million years, it's too short of a period of time for it to have formed on Earth. So you needed some sort of panspermia.
Yeah.
And so you needed something to have traveled interstellar. What's the best candidate for traveling interstellar? Probably an extremophile, something like a mushroom.
Yes.
Mushrooms are almost like zip files of consciousness. They show up at the end of life and before life. And so, like, if you look at Chernobyl, for example, like what grows first after the, experience? Mushrooms. You have they call it the wood wide web, I believe, in Oregon. It's like the, largest organism in the world is actually like a mycelial network. And then where it gets really trippy is like, if you think about a Kardashev 4 scale civilization, which is Kardashev scales are basically like our ability to harness energy, but you could think of it as like a completely intergalactic civilization that's like just very deep spacefaring. What would it look like? Would it look like a kind of bipedal hominid where you like show up, on another planet and you get you're this fragile kind of meaty thing that gets shot at? No, you would be this like zip file of consciousness, extremophile, that would spread all throughout other planets, and you would basically create a symbiotic relationship with hosts. And we all have microbiomes. It's passé to say that, but we also all have mycobiomes that accompany the microbiomes. And there's the mind-gut connection is also this passé thing to talk about. Obviously, you have the vagus nerve, you have neurotransmitters getting created. So, mushrooms obviously affect our thinking. You can watch bullet ants in the Amazon getting like taken over by cordyceps mushrooms, and literally their whole muscular skeletal system are being they're being controlled by the mushrooms. And then you look at specific jumps in human evolution, and the one that people talk about is obviously the stoned ape theory, which is why did we double in cranial size between 2 million years ago, Homo habilis, and Homo sapiens 300,000 years ago? That's really trippy. Maybe it was because as hunter-gatherers, we were following, animals. Animals take shits, and there's psilocybin cubensis, or grow on poop, and and then people would trip out. They'd take these mushrooms and they trip out, and then you get like neurogenesis, and you get these epigenetic changes, and you get this doubling of cranial size. But what's the other big break in human evolution 10,000 years ago, which is the advent of civilization and culture? And think about what really is the kind of the line break there? What happened? We created, an agrarian society, like basically agriculture. So you have wheat, barley, and rye were the first crops that we grew. And what grows on wheat, barley, and rye? Ergot, and these sort of psychedelic substances. And so I think a lot of people assume that the agriculture gets created, and then you get specialization, you get urbanization, you get history, you get religion. All of these things are downstream of like, we have more time, we can think about this stuff. But what if they're downstream of the tripping that occurred? And if you look at actually, The Immortality Key by Brian Murarescu, he will openly say, I think these mystery rituals go way back before the Greeks. And you had pre-Socratic rituals that Peter Kingsley writes about. Heidegger writes about this. So how far back did it go? Maybe it goes back to that big break, around then. And then you get into this thing of like, are mushrooms sort of symbiotic, Kardashev 4 scale aliens that, are Trojan horses for their own species that like we ingest? They get into us, and then they sort of subtly control our thoughts, our behavior, our perception. And, it goes back to the McKenna. McKenna actually had this trip in the Amazonian forest. And he says about the mushroom, he says, he's speaking to the mushroom, and the mushroom says, within my memory exists the blueprints for hyper light drive ships. So it's like the mushrooms are seeding us with this ability to go interstellar. And think about all of the crazy ideas that we've gotten from psychedelics, you know? So who are we to say that our evolution is not being co-directed or assisted by, you know, something else? And we're now saying this we're saying this with bacteria and other things like that, that, you know, it's hard to say exactly what scale or hierarchy, you know, biological evolution occurs. But, you know, I think mushrooms are a really great candidate. Also, humans mistake human tissue for fungal diseases. We're so susceptible to fungal disease because human and mushroom DNA are actually very similar. Human and mushroom and mycelial DNA are more phylogenetically similar than humans and plant DNA.
Yeah, mushrooms breathe air.
There you go.
So just like when you tell people that, they go, "Whoa!"
Yeah,
and they can survive in a vacuum.
In a vacuum, and they're very homeostatic in nature. They can eat plastic in certain situations and stuff. And so it's like they are the stewards of the earth. If you get out of line too much or something, it's like they'll, you know, and then think about people that take mushrooms. They become more like conscientious vis-a-vis the entire earth. So they're very sort of like, they're all about ecological balance.
It's just so stunning how one presidential administration that was trying to stop the anti-war movement and the civil rights movement threw water on like one of the most profound compounds that exists on Earth.
Totally.